You mentioned that sometimes the memories didn't emerge until later in life, and hasn't that been a big debate in psychology, is whether or not memories, traumatic memories, can be repressed, and lots of court cases around those sorts of
Yes, I've
issues.
been an expert witness in many cases on what are called Daubert hearings, where you have to prove the scientific evidence that is such a thing as dissociative amnesia, as it's called, rather than repressed memories. I've been involved in a number of those cases, and um, we began in the last 10 years to win most of those cases for two reasons. One is because the science is developed. There are, as of today, 110 articles on people partially or fully forgetting childhood sexual abuse. In other words, the science has really responded. In every one of those studies, there's some percentage of people who don't remember, not a great percentage, but some percentage of people who don't remember childhood sexual abuse. So the false memory people saying that it doesn't exist is simply wrong, according to the data. But the
Hmm.
second reason, a more powerful reason that we began winning in the courts, the Daubert hearings, was because of neuroscience, mostly coming out of Europe and Germany. But there have been a number of studies on what's called dissociative amnesia. And in ordinary emotional memory, we store and retrieve the memory through two different neural circuits. One is the right temporal parietal system. That's where long-term autobiographical or emotional autobiographical memories are stored. And the second is the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the sense of self, the sense of Dan-ness or Davidness. So when you retrieve a trauma, two things happen. There are two circuits that get activated. The right temporal parietal system, which is the retrieval of the emotional memory. And the second is the medial prefrontal cortex, which means that the memory is about the self. Then we can say that this is an emotional experience that I had and it happened to me. In fact, the neuroscience is exactly mirrored a point that Pierre Genet, the grandfather of dissociation, said 150 years ago, that when you recover from traumatic memory, two things need to happen. One he called realization, making the memory emotionally real. And the second is personification. That is, you have to say, this is an experience that happened to me. And you can get people who can come up with a memory, but it's not emotional. They distance themselves from the emotion. Or you can have people who come up with an emotional memory, but they can't say it happened to me. And those two processes, personification and realization, exactly mirror what the neurobiology of dissociative amnesia show, because either the sense of self goes offline or the emotional memory circuits that retrieve the memory go offline. And since that's well established, particularly in Markovich's work and others in Germany, then we began to introduce that as testimony in the court. And so people who have dissociative amnesia, it's not something that's iatrogenically suggested. It's actually a real diagnosis with clear neurobiological roots.